Hello there, this is Daniele from Toolchefs and welcome to this new video. So today we are looking at the new Atoms Crowd Digital Assets that are introduced with Atoms VFX 5. So Atoms Digital Assets are metadata files that contain all the necessary information for rebuilding a simulation. So basically these files contain information about the agent groups, any animation if they have animation on any of the attributes. They also will have information about height fields. Also with the exporter and importer for the Atoms digital assets, you can also export the scene JSON, the variation JSON, and all the height fields and navigation meshes can also be exported, even any mesh that as you use as input for your any attribute of your agent groups, and the same thing happens for curves and so on. So the idea is that basically you can export these digital assets from a Maya scene or a Houdini scene, and then you can re-import the same digital asset from the same application that you use. So for instance, if you export it from Maya, you can also re-import it in another Maya scene, or you can do the same in Houdini, or you can export from Houdini and import in Maya and so on. So you can have basically an hybrid workflow. Before you couldn't do this, you could just share the setup, so the scene JSON for the scene and the variations, but now you can actually share the simulation in a sense. So you can actually, again, rebuild it and then tweak it in another application or in another scene, and then export it and then reuse it and so on. So you can have like a workflow where basically you can start by creating templates for your shots or sequences, and then you can reuse them and tweak them in other scenes. So we're gonna have a look at some of the demo scenes that we ship with Atoms, to see all the features that we provide with the new digital asset exporter and importers. So here I have the scene. So this is the proximity test scene. I'm going to go under Atoms and then Tools and then Digital Asset, and then I'm going to click on the Exporter. So this UI will show up, and in here you have a list of the agent groups that are available in the scene. So you can select one or all of them. Then you can press on the arrow button to bring them on the right side. So these agent groups are going to be the ones that are going to be exported. You can, of course, remove some of them if you want by using the bin button. I'm not going to do that, but that's what you can do. Then here we have some options. So, and these are kind of important also regarding performances when you export your ADA file. So the Atoms digital assets, we have the the short form of that is ADA, and that's also the file extension for the file. So these checkboxes, they're quite simple. So scene JSON, you're going to export the scene JSON, which is the same thing that you can do from here, Atom scene, export scene JSON. Variation JSON, you're going to export the variation JSON, which is the same thing that you can do with export variation JSON here. With the variation JSON, it's important to know that we don't actually also copy the geometry files and materials. This is just exporting the JSON. So yeah, this is important to know. Then we have animation and animated meshes. So for animation, it's basically when you have like attributes that are being driven by connections in your scenes, and here I'm of course talking in Maya, but also in Houdini you can have like expressions and so on. And then also you might have might have directly animated an attribute. If you have this on, basically we're going to export that animation. When we export animation, we do two things. So the first one is we actually export animation curves that can be reused in the same host. So if you work just in a Maya workflow, when you re-import this ADA file in another scene, you're actually going to find the same animation curves that you had in your original scene. But also we export baked data because, for instance, in Houdini, basically the way in which curves are handled, animation curves are handled, it's not the same as in Maya, but we are still exporting the baked animation, so you can still have like the animation in Houdini, but that's of course just gonna be baked. Again, in Houdini, if you export the ADA in Houdini and then you import it in Houdini, you're gonna find animation curves. It's not it doesn't happen just in workflows where you're basically sharing the ADAs between different hosts. And then for animated meshes, if you check this one, we're going to export for meshes and curves, we export alembics. And if you enable this option here, what happens is we're going to also export those alembics if they're animated as, animated alembics. This is important because, when you export Alembics, you're actually iterating through the timeline. So if you have a lot of meshes, if you have a lot of mesh driving, like your attributes, my attributes, for instance, if you have a mesh scatter and so on, or other, modules that actually allow you to have animated meshes or animated curves, then this could actually slow down quite a lot the export process of the ADA. So it's very important that you are careful with the animated meshes. Of course, if you have just one high field, then you want to export that, but also if you want to export the entire setup, is fine. Just keep in mind that the export process could be quite slow because of all the iterations that we'll have to do, the exporter will have to do through the timeline. So once you're happy with your selection, I'm going to export everything because I have nothing particular in this scene here. I'm going to click on this button. I'm going to basically save these in a destination file, so the ADA, and I'm going to say, I'm going to call this one, actually, let me create a new folder because we're going to export a few ADAs. So this one, I'm going to call it proximity, and then I'm going to do export. So the ADA file has been already exported, and if I go and check with the file browser, here we have the proximity file, and then we have a JSON folder which contains the scene and the variations. Okay, so now we can also have a look at the ADA file just quickly. So I'm going to go here under Atoms, Tools, Metadata Browser. You can browse it and to see basically the information that is being stored into the ADA file. So let me just make the window a bit bigger. So here it's saying that the host was Maya that created this ADA. Then we have this data, data structure. So here we have it's a map metadata. In here we have information coming from the scene, so the frame rate and so on, the FPS and so on. We have no high fields and nav meshes. Then we have agent groups, and here we have the list of the agent groups. For each agent group, you will find both host data. So this is like the information coming from the host. So for instance, if you had like an animated attribute, it would be stored here. Here basically I have nothing because of course all these attributes weren't animated. And then here we have all our modules. So we have the module attributes. So we have agent type was man and so on. I mean, here you have all the attributes that you have for each agent group. Sorry, for each module of each agent group. Here, of course, we have the name and the type, if the module was enabled or not, and so on. So basically, this is also how we can check what was exported, in case you are interested into that. And of course, as any metadata files, you could also edit these metadata file yourself with Python or with C++. Just make sure, to know, basically, you need to know what you're doing, because otherwise you might just break the ADA. So now we can go in Houdini. So let's open Houdini. We have it here, and we can go under Tools, Digital Asset. So Tools, Digital Asset, and then Importer. You can select the same ADA file, and we can click Import. So here we have, again, we can say, I want to import the animation. I want to import the scene JSON and the variation JSON. In this case, I'm going to just say yes. Otherwise, you can also here say, I want to ignore, so I don't want to import the JSON, or you can even merge it with what you have already in your scene. I'm going to click Import. Okay, and now here in my scene, I have the same setup that I had before in Maya. So if I press play here, we have the same simulation. That was basically running in Maya. If you go inside each agent group, so here you see the name is pretty much the same. We can go in here. You see we have the same modules, and each module will have the same values basically that we had before in Maya. Okay, so this is basically the first example. Now let's have a look at the next one. Okay, so now let's have a look at another example. We're gonna export a scene from Houdini and then bring it into Maya. This scene here is the one where we have like an animated high field, and we want to export this simulation into Maya. So we're gonna go under Atoms, Tools, Digital Assets, and then Exporter. We're gonna move this agent group to the right list. I'm gonna keep the animated meshes on because otherwise we just export a static frame for the mesh. And then I'm gonna call it anim.hf. I'll click export. And now the digital asset has been exported. So now I'm gonna go into Maya and I'm gonna say atoms, tools, digital asset importer. Yes. I want to initialize the scene. I'm gonna open the anim.hf ADA. I'm gonna click open and then import. Okay. So now if I press play, we'll see we have the animated meshes, and the agent group is, the characters are actually working on the mesh. So if we go in here in the high field manager, we see that we have the same high field that we had in Houdini. So and the mesh is connected, of course, to this high field. Now let's have a look at the final example. So I've opened the follow target scene here, and in the scene we have just this agent following this target here. Just to make things a bit different, I'm going to also animate the state. So I'm going to set the key here to 1, and then I'm going to set another key here. Here I'm going to say 2. So basically what I want to do is, like, I want the agent first, I want it to walk, then I want to start jogging, and then at the end of the simulation I'm going to make it walk again. Okay. I'm going to go in the attribute editor, sorry, in the graph editor here. I'm going to change, actually, well, they're fine like this, so I'm going to save them like this. I'm going to save the scene just quickly. So in the scene here, we have the follow target module that is basically getting the position from this locator here. This animation here, so these attributes are going to be baked because when we rebuild the simulation in Maya, we don't actually create a new locator. We just have values feeding into this attribute. But so while for this attribute here, we're going to have baked animation. Here we should have like the animations that we saw it in the graph editor earlier. So I'm going to go here under Atoms, Tools, Digital Asset Exporter. Then I'm going to move this guy over here. I'm going to go back to ADA. I'm going to create a new folder. Let's call this one follow. And then I'm going to export. Okay. So the first thing that I want to do, and I want to show you what happens when I import this in Maya. So I'm going to do tools, sorry, where is it? Tools, importer, yes. And I'm going to import the file that I just exported. So as you can see here already, we have an agent group, but we don't have the locator that was driving the follow target module. If I select this agent group here, we see we have some animation on the state and some on the follow target. So let's open just quickly the graph editor. So here we have for the target, we have baked animation on the X and Y, but also Y and Z axis. While for the state machine, we have these attributes, like the animation that we set up earlier with on the state attribute. So if now I press play, the simulation basically will be the same. The only thing that, of course, it will differ from the previous scene is that we don't have the locator there. Okay, so that's cool. Let's go in Houdini and let's try to import this one there. Okay, so let's go under Atoms, Tools, Digital Asset Importer. I'm going to import that ADA file. And now, as we can see here, we have our simulation. We can press play. Let's make it like this. And if we go inside the agent group, let's open the animation editor here. Go on the animation, sorry, on the agent group here. You can check that the state machine state attribute is animated. I can add it to the channel list. So we can see here is, because we're now in Houdini coming from Maya, the attribute is baked. We don't have just a single keyframes anymore. And for the follow target, it's the same. So we have the baked animation that is coming from Maya. So whenever you're gonna export something from Houdini and then import it in Maya, you're gonna see the same thing. So we're always gonna see baked animation. Okay, so this is everything for the Atoms digital asset. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.